Diabetes, a paradigm shift. Over to you, sir.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's nice to see. And after this beautiful cardiology talk, I would like to make it a point to remember Professor James Herrick. How many know Professor James Herrick? Can I have a show of hands? How many of you know James Herrick? Nobody? We lost him today in 1954, 7th March. The guy who was actually responsible to show that myocardial infarction happens primarily because of the clogging of coronary arteries. In fact, him with Dr. Fred Smith, they have demonstrated the changes of ST elevation on ECG, and it was Dr. Herrick who was a strong proponent of the use of ECG in diagnosis of myocardial infarction. Along with this, we are on the eve of International Women's Day. So I would put my head down and bows to all the beautiful ladies who are here. Accept our best wishes and thanks for being there always. आणि मराठीत सांगायचं असेल तर पुरुषांना खऱ्या अर्थाने पौरुष्य बहाल करणाऱ्या सर्व सौंदर्य सम्राज्ञींना माझा साष्टांग नमस्कार. Thank you very much. And let's talk about a little different topic than what people have talked. We have talked about gliptins, we have talked about GLPs, we have talked about nutrition, we have talked about AGIs. Sanjay has very eloquently talked about metabolism, different metabolics and different metabolisms. So let's talk about nephrovascular metabolism and where today DPP4, especially saxagliptin, comes into play. This you have seen. I am not going to go into the details about this, but what concerns me more is the amount of expected rise in the population of diabetes in the Southeast Asian countries. And it's even though numerically we may be a little behind China, but I am really not very convinced about the fact, because if you can look at the amount of rise in the diabetic population in the Southeast Asian countries, you will be surprised that we are witnessing almost 75% rise, where China and the Western Pacific people, they are just witnessing 31% rise. Even though the highest rise comes in the MENA countries and the African countries, but we have a point to be concerned about it. So it's time to act and time to really think about not only preventing or stopping the progression of diabetes, but also start thinking about preventing the complications which are related to it. Because what actually determines the economy, or what actually worsens the economy, is the cost which is involved as far as the management of the complications are concerned. And it's very difficult to understand and very difficult to digest that every $1 spent in 9 are spent on the management of diabetes and its complications. And if you talk into the Indian rupees part of the stuff, I'll tell you that we invest, every Indian invests 17,000 rupees every day for protecting our borders. If we all invest just 17 rupees every day, we can address a lot of problems in India. And diabetic kidney disease is one such onslaught where most of the diabetics are going to face. And the incidence is around 20 to 40% depending on the age of the diabetes and the previous glycemic and associated risk factors those are involved. And this is a classical paper which was presented by Jeromas. And you can see as the beta cells, they slump or topple down. Similarly, the renal functions or the glomeruli topple down because of the onslaught of this glycemia. And as people, they age with diabetes, the renal functions, they go down with diabetes. And now what we talk it as a cardiorenal syndrome, because if somebody has got a kidney disease, 50% will die even before reaching dialysis by a coronary event or a cardiovascular event. So therefore, it's a cardiorenal syndrome rather than a cardiac disease per se or a cardiovascular disease. Now I'm going to open a new Pandora's box for you. What are the parameters that look you look into when you actually want to know the renal parameters? What are the things that you monitor? What are the things that you monitor? Can anybody tell me what are the things that you monitor? UACR you monitor, correct? Anything else? Anything else which is more simpler? EGFR. Somebody said EGFR? Right? So most of the people, they would say EGFR. And if you talk to nephrologists, they will always ask for a EGFR. But is this EGFR a correct surrogate marker or an indicator of a renal disease? Let's see, and you will be surprised the data that I'm going to come to. So we monitor people, those who have kidney disease, we monitor on these grounds. Albuminuria, we check EGFR, we check their glycemic control, their lipid profile, sodium levels or hypertension control, and of course associated blood pressure management, smoking cessation, weight reduction, everything. This way we monitor these people. Let's talk about albuminuria a bit. Around 5 years before, every one of us had this approach in analyzing the kidney disease progression. We had a typical step care way of analysis that we looked in for the normal albumin, then we looked for microalbuminuria, and then we looked for the clinical proteinuria happening, and ultimately we started thinking about end-stage renal disease. But now, this paper from China has changed everything, where they have shown that in even normal urine albuminic patient, the patient can be an end-stage renal disease patient. So ESRD is no more directly related to the amount of the albumin. Rather, it is related directly probably to the amount of the protein which is present in the urine. So microalbuminuria, again, is a questionable. This is a debatable issue for ages, but now this has raised few more questions on analysis and monitoring microalbuminuria in urine. And that's what Avdesh was talking about advanced on. And somebody asked, why gliclazide probably does better as far as the kidney protection goes. And I have a little explanation to that, because if you remember sulfonylureas, they work through a sulfonylurea receptor and potassium inward rectifier channels. Now these potassium inward rectifier channels have two isotypes. Number one, 6.1 and 6.2. Now, sulfonylurea receptor 2A and 2B are responsible for most of the vascular events or protection. 2A, primarily, they are distributed on the larger blood vessels, especially in the heart and in the muscles. And they cause primarily reduction in the ischemic preconditioning. But sulfonylurea 2B and potassium inward rectifier, that are KIR 6.2 channels, are there on the vascular smooth muscles, which reduce down the vascular smooth muscle proliferation. And that could be one of the reasons why in advance on gliclazide, people have been benefited for the nephropathy outcomes. But this paper is very beautiful. And they have looked into two surrogate markers of EGFR and urinary albumin creatinine ratio. And they have shown that isolated EGFR dip by around 40% increases the risk of cardiovascular heart outcomes by almost 58%. Increase in the urinary albumin creatinine ratio by 40% will also increase the risk by 32%. But if you take these two parameters and analyze them in combination, you'll realize that the risk goes up by almost 130%. So the hazard ratio goes significantly up. So it's not just albuminuria, it's the proteinuria, which is a probably better marker of a renal function than even EGFR or microalbuminuria. And there are multiple studies which show that proteinuria correlates better with the heart CV outcomes, especially when the kidney disease progression is concerned, ESRD is concerned, CV events are concerned, or even all-cause mortality is concerned. And this paper by Jason, which showed that if you achieve the reduction in the proteinuria, or albuminuria, which is a depictor of proteinuria, you achieve the reduction in the all-cause mortality and the cardiovascular mortality. And hence, Kidney International, they have stopped recommending isolated EGFR analysis as a surrogate marker. They said that no, it cannot be. You have to simultaneously consider the presence of albuminuria or persistent albuminuria or proteinuria in the urine. So what are the things that you would like to see before you initiate the anti-diabetic drugs in the patients with kidney disease? We all know that DPP-4 are the unique class of the drugs where hardly they require dose adjustment except a few. If it is Lina and Teneli, you don't require to do any dose adjustments. But if it is Saxa, if it is Vilda, you have to do one-step dose adjustment. If it is Sita, if it is Allo, you need to do two-step dose adjustments. So 2 dose adjustments are needed with Sita and Allo. 1-step dose adjustment is needed with Saxa and Vilda, and no dose adjustment is needed with Teneli and linagliptin. So DPP-4 inhibitors are beautiful drugs. They not only address the renal safety, they not only address the renal protection, but they also address hypoglycemia. So let's understand what is renal safety, what is renal protection, what is dose flexibility. Are these similar terminologies, renal safety, renal protection, and dose flexibility? Are these similar terminologies? No, they are different. Remember, when we talk about renal safety, here we are talking about drug not harming kidney. When we talk about renal protection, we talk about the drug which not only protects the kidney but offers benefits in the kidney disease. And dose flexibility is a standard term, I don't have to talk about it. And this is what exactly I've talked to you, that look at the different gliptins on the board, and here you can see that Saxa and Vilda are 50% excreted in liver or in the feces, or metabolized in liver and feces, and 50% in kidneys. So they just require one dose adjustment sometimes. I'm going to talk to you about Severtimi and what exactly untold story about Severtimi. Severtimi, we all know, we have talked about cardiovascular outcomes, there were challenges, there were incidents of increased heart failure, and the questions were asked, and later on it was proved that there was some faulty analysis which has happened. But there is one area which is not addressed adequately when Severtimi was published. That was renal outcomes. How many of you heard about renal outcomes of Severtimi? Can I have a show of hands? I'm sure very few of you would be there. So what does the Severtimi talked? And let us see. So an exploratory renal analysis was done after the publication of Severtimi. And what was achieved was that if you can see that the Severtimi had multiple patients of multiple characters. Initially planned for only 13,000 patients. Ultimately, when the trial ended, it had almost 16,500 patients. Now, why this happened is primarily because the numbers needed to be treated or events were not happening. So they included very hot patients, fresh from angiogram, fresh from cath lab, acute myocardial infarction, hospitalized for ACS. All these patients were included in this. So here are the patients, those who had maximum number of the patients, those who had a preserved renal functions. There were few with moderate kidney disease, and there were few with the severe kidney disease. And what they found out, and this is the beautiful analysis. In fact, I have also first time realized this. When you put eGFR as a surrogate marker or the analytical marker for the kidney disease and compare the hard outcomes, cardiovascular outcomes, in the patient, those who had eGFR above 50 and eGFR below 50, to my surprise, Severtimi shows that there is no difference in the cardiovascular outcomes. So that makes me to challenge whether eGFR is a real way of monitoring these patients. I need to ask. Similarly, if you talk about renal hard endpoints, like creatinine doubling time, renal replacement therapy, serum creatinine going up above 6, patients landing up with hemodialysis. Same way, eGFR did not correlate with the outcomes. There was no difference between the outcomes when the people had eGFR of more than 50 and below 50. So that was very surprising. And that is the reason albumin creatinine ratio was looked into Severtimi. And there it showed that saxagliptin, when it was added along with the other parallel therapy, it offered a clear benefit of proteinuria reduction and even microalbuminuria reduction as well. And we all know that Severtimi had patients, those who had a cardiac event, so they were all with adequate renal protections. Like most of them were on ACE, ARBs, statins, beta blockers, most of them were there. Still, addition of saxagliptin offered a better kidney outcome. This slide of Severtimi tells the tale of everything. where you can see that saxagliptin caused reduction in the ACR and there is a minuscule rise in EGFR. So EGFR stays stable, albuminuria comes down, you have got a positive cardiovascular outcome. So there is a huge difference between the way we have to look to EGFR alone and proteinuria, clinically significant proteinuria and microalbuminuria in the urine. So if EGFR is being maintained along with the reduction of ACR, both together, they possibly improve the underlying progression of the kidney disease. That's a very important thing that severtimig depicts. Avdesh talked about Carolina. I am going to talk to you about Carmelina. Carolina was a sulfonylurea linagliptin trial. Carolina was didactic renal trial, where they had all kidney patients in, and they used linagliptin and tried to find out what exactly linagliptin does. And if you compare both mortality benefits of Lina and Saxa in Carmelina and Severtimig, there is no change, almost similar outcomes. In fact, Carmelina analyzed the continuous deterioration. So the analysis of the renal deterioration was done in a continuous fashion in Carmelina, where Severtimig did not look at it because Severtimig was not actually planned to look at for the renal data. But still you can find out that outcomes were almost similar in Severtimig trial. But if you see here, which Carmelina did not show, was shown by Severtimig, that significant microalbuminuria reduction happened with Severtimig. And the difference between the Severtimig and Carmelina was the patients with end-stage renal disease were not included in Carmelina. So people with less than 15 EGFR were not included in Carmelina, but they were there in Severtimig trial. And hence, when they gave saxagliptin in the patients, those who are on with hemodialysis, they could find out easily that there were no hypoglycemia, there were no side effects. We all know that patients, those who have end-stage renal disease or a renal disease, they are very susceptible for getting hypoglycemias. So if you look at the prescription pattern of different gliptins in the end-stage renal disease, you will find that saxagliptin is a clear choice of the drug in end-stage renal disease patients, the patients those are on with. Why they are? Because if you put on all the different gliptins and all the cardiovascular renal data available together in one table, you will realize here that as far as dose modification in CKD 3B stage and below, you don't require to do any dose modification, any of the gliptins except CETA and ALLO. Risk of hypoglycemia, almost similar. Glycemic efficacy data, it is available for Saxa, CETA, and Vilda. It is not available for Lina, and it is not available for Teneli. Cardiovascular outcome trials available for only 3, Saxa, Lina, and CETA. Vilda, Teneli do not have cardiovascular outcome trials. Cardiovascular outcome trials having all CKD stages patient enrolled, only one trial, Severtimig. So only saxagliptin. Renal safety, everywhere. Reversal of proteinuria, only saxagliptin. So that makes me to ask question that where you would put saxagliptin as. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would say that glycemic efficacy and cardiovascular renal safety data is imperative, especially when you are managing the patients of diabetes. No dose modification of saxagliptin which is there or needed when you are managing the patients of moderate, mild to moderate, where CKD 3B and below patients. Treatment with saxagliptin will improve ACR, will improve EGFR, will improve the proteinuria, and offers what we call it as a cardiorenal protection in true sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate your presence here at the fag end of the evening. I hope I have done the justice, and thank you for AstraZeneca people to have supported this talk. Thank you. I am open for the questions.
So, any questions?
I know they're too tired, and I have adequately confused them.
So, in the era of this SGLT2 inhibitors, so what do you think, sir? Sexa or SGLT2 inhibitors?
No, they are not comparable. Let us not compare it. See, Saxa or gliptins as a molecule are different molecules. SGLTs are completely different molecules. So let's not compare it. It happens, we tend to compare them. But they are two different molecules acting at two different places, and they do have got a different ways of action. So let's not compare them. As far as renal safety data are concerned, probably SGLTs are also coming up in a very high way. Now you are going to get mechanistic trials with SGLT2 inhibitors. So wait for them. EMPA-VISION is going to come, or DAPA-CKD is going to come. So there are so many trials which are going to come, which are mechanistic SGLT2 trials. In fact, in the patient, those who have got with preserved ejection fraction, non-diabetic people with just reduced or having a diastolic dysfunction. So all these people are going to be there. Unfortunately, DPP4, they do not have such kind of a data or outcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah? Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Hiramat, Dr. Mangesh Tivaskar, Dr. Deshmane, Dr. Harle, Dr. Mane. I request you all to move to the Banting Hall for further sessions.